Before everything went wrong, before the yelling and the bat and the fear I still feel in my bones, I used to tell people that moving for love was the bravest thing I ever did. I grew up in a quiet mountain town in West Virginia, where life moved slow and familiar. When Brooke Hale asked me to move into her apartment in Alexandria, Virginia, it felt like a chance to start a life that was finally mine. We'd been talking for months online. She had this combination of vulnerability and intensity that pulled me in. She worked long shifts at a dental clinic. I had just landed a junior graphic design job, and we both liked the idea of building something new together. So in the summer of 2019, I packed my things into 2 suitcases and boarded a bus east. Brooke hugged me at the station like she'd been waiting forever. The apartment at Laurelwood Residences was small, thin walls, cheap carpet, but it felt like possibility. The first week was sweet. She left notes in my lunch bag. I made her coffee before work. We planned to get a dog once we felt settled. But even then, there were moments I didn't understand. She had a tense way of checking her phone. Sometimes she'd stare at the front door like expecting someone she didn't want to see. She briefly mentioned an ex who made her crazy. A restraining order she described as exaggerated. I brushed it all off. People have pasts. I figured she'd share more when she trusted me. For a while, life felt good, or at least good enough. I wasn't prepared for how quickly it would shift. By October, the affection started slipping away. Brooke came home exhausted, closed off, barely speaking. Some nights she shut herself in the bedroom for hours. Other nights she stayed out late and brushed aside my questions. It wasn't that she was angry. She was vacant, like a roommate who barely acknowledged me. I tried to bring it up, but everything I said turned into a conflict. "You're analyzing me again," she'd snap. "You're making things worse." Eventually, I stopped trying because the silence felt safer than setting her off. By November, I spent most nights on the couch. The bedroom door stayed closed. The space between us stretched like a crack I couldn't fix. With no friends nearby and no one to talk to, I started posting on Reddit late at night, venting about stress, loneliness, feeling like I was losing my place in my own life. That's where I met her, Ariel 98. Her first comment was simple: "You sound worn down." "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." We started messaging about small things at first. Movies, art, dumb memes. But loneliness makes you vulnerable. And before long, we were talking about deeper things. Feeling unappreciated, feeling invisible, feeling stuck. She listened without judgment. She made me laugh again. She made me feel like someone saw me. Brooke noticed. She started waking up at random hours and standing silently in the hallway while I typed. "Who are you talking to?" she asked once. I lied. It became easier to lie the second time. The more distant she became, the more I clung to those late-night messages. I didn't see it as cheating. I saw it as survival. But survival has a way of turning into escape. And escape has a way of being discovered. One rainy Tuesday night, I decided to leave. Not forever, just for a weekend. I booked a flight to Arizona to meet Ariel. I told myself it was only to think clearly, away from Brooke's moods and the tension that felt like static in the apartment. I was packing a small bag when Brooke came home unexpectedly. She was soaked from the rain, hair dripping, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked exhausted. When her eyes landed on the suitcase, something hardened in her expression. "What's this?" she asked. I stumbled for an answer. Before I could speak, her gaze shifted to my phone on the couch, screen lit with a new message from Ariel. Her face went blank. Not angry, not shocked, just blank. Without saying a word, she turned and walked to the hallway closet. For a moment, I thought she was grabbing her coat. Instead, she came back holding her aluminum baseball bat, the one she once joked she kept for safety. I'd never heard her joke about it since. "You were leaving," she whispered. "You were actually leaving me." I stepped back. "Brooke, wait. Let me explain." But she didn't want an explanation. The first swing hit my Xbox, shattering the casing. Sparks shot across the floor. She screamed, raw, furious, wounded. She swung again, the bat cracking through plastic like bone. "Liar! Cheater! You don't get to leave me!" She chased me through the living room, swinging hard enough that one blow buried itself in the drywall an inch from my head. I ran for the bathroom and slammed the door shut just as she reached it. The bat crashed against the door again and again, each hit vibrating through my spine. For 10 minutes she screamed, begged, cursed, cried. Then, suddenly, silence. The silence was worse. I stayed locked in that bathroom until dawn. When the apartment grew light with morning, I cracked open the bathroom door. Brooke was asleep on the couch, curled up with the bat across her lap like she'd been guarding it. The floor was littered with broken plastic, dented drywall, and pieces of my life I didn't dare stop to collect. I grabbed my bag and quietly walked out. 2 exits down the highway, I checked into a cheap motel. I spent the rest of the day lying awake on a stiff mattress, replaying every moment. I kept hearing the bat hit the door. I kept seeing her face, not the rage, but the calm between the swings. Like she wasn't losing control, like she was taking it. That night I called my mom. I didn't tell her everything, not then, but she heard it in my voice. "Come home, Dylan," she said. I drove back to West Virginia the next day with the windows cracked because I couldn't shake the feeling Brooke might be hiding in the back seat. I never returned to Virginia. Brooke tried to contact me dozens of times. Texts, emails, number after number. Half of them said she was sorry. The other half accused me of ruining her life. I blocked her on everything, but blocking someone doesn't block the memories. For months, I jumped at sounds. Doors closing too hard, metal clanking, footsteps in a hallway. I kept my keys in my pocket even inside the house. Every room had to have an exit. Every silence felt like a threat. It took time before I admitted the truth to myself. I wasn't afraid of the bat. I was afraid of the belief behind her eyes that night, that I didn't have the right to leave, and therapy helped me admit the parts I'd been avoiding. Brooke wasn't just overwhelmed or insecure. She was unstable in a way I wasn't equipped to handle. Her past wasn't messy. It was dangerous. And I had ignored the warning signs because I wanted to believe love could fix anything. My therapist explained something that stuck with me. "You didn't make her behave that way. You were just there when her unhealed wounds hit a breaking point." It didn't excuse what she did, but it helped me let go of the guilt. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. Small routines, steady work, reconnecting with people I had isolated myself from. I moved into a quieter place with roommates who shut doors gently and asked if I was okay when I flinched at sudden noises. The fear didn't vanish overnight. It still shows up sometimes, in dreams of that hallway, in the sound of metal clanking, in the way I keep my phone charged at all times. But it no longer controls me. I'm learning to breathe through it, learning that safety is a place you can grow back into. Some nights, I still think about Brooke, not with longing, not with anger, but with a kind of distant pity. She needed help long before I met her, but I couldn't save her. I wasn't meant to. Leaving wasn't the moment I failed her. It was the moment I saved myself. And I'm finally learning that survival isn't shameful. It's brave. When love turns into fear, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. You are never obligated to stay in a relationship that threatens your safety, emotionally, mentally, or physically. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself. I came to Pine Hollow to become someone better than the kid I used to be. Growing up, my dad drowned himself in alcohol and apologies, and my mom worked double shifts that kept her out of the house more than she was ever in it. I spent most nights alone with microwave dinners and a cheap camcorder, filming anything that made me feel like life had meaning. I wanted to turn stories into something real. Documentary filmmaking felt like a lifeline. So when I got accepted to Pine Hollow University, I left home without looking back. The apartment on Alder Lane was supposed to be a fresh start, nothing fancy, just affordable and close to campus. But the first night I walked inside, something felt wrong. The air was colder than it should have been. and a draft crawled across the floor even though the windows were shut tight. The place didn't look haunted, didn't smell moldy or old. It just felt vacant in the wrong way. My new roommate, Elliot, was polite enough. He barely talked, kept to himself, and always wore the same gray sweater that made him blend into the walls. He seemed fine during the day, quiet, respectful, but once the sun went down, he became tense and silent. He moved around the apartment lightly, like he was afraid of waking someone. I tried to chalk it up to quirks. Everyone had them. But then I found the charcoal sketch under the couch cushion, a drawing of our hallway, realistic enough to make my stomach tighten. In the drawing, a tall shadow stood behind Elliot's bedroom door. The shape was blurred, elongated, like it didn't understand how a human body was supposed to look. When I asked Elliot about it, he stared at the drawing too long before mumbling, "It's old, throw it out." The first real scare happened a few nights later. I woke up to whispering from Elliot's room, low, strained, like someone negotiating with someone else. "I said I'm here," he whispered. "Stop standing by the door." When I stepped into the hallway, the air was frigid, breath visible frigid. The hall was empty. Elliot claimed the next morning that he'd been on the phone, but he looked anything but fine. Then came the night he sleepwalked into my room. I woke to see him standing next to my bed, staring at the open doorway behind me. "Don't leave your door open," he murmured. "It follows movement." He turned and walked out, silent as a shadow. I locked my door after that. Things escalated quickly. Objects moved when my back was turned. My door swelled like something pushed from the other side. Once, the hallway light flickered in a steady rhythm, almost like breathing. I tried to confront Elliot the next morning. "You're scaring me," I said. His voice cracked for the first time. "Then keep your door shut. I can't protect both of us." "Protect us from what?" He just shook his head. It got worse when I heard that Elliot had a previous roommate, someone who'd vanished during winter break 2 years earlier. Police called it a runaway. Neighbors said they heard 2 voices arguing in the apartment at night, though Elliot insisted he lived alone. That was the moment I realized I didn't know the person sleeping 10 feet from me, and I didn't know what he might have brought into the apartment. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I tried to drag the washer forward to fix a metal clank it made. Behind it, hidden against the wall, was a small trapdoor packed with dust. The landlord had insisted there was no attic access. He lied. The crawl space above the hallway was cramped and stale, but I found a pile of Elliot's notebooks buried in the far corner. The entries were shaky, frantic. "It follows movement. It waits behind doors." It started after I found the box at the old railway tunnel. It doesn't like corners. It likes straight lines. There were drawings too, rough shadows behind doors, stretched shapes standing in hallways just like ours. When I confronted Elliot that evening, he went pale. "You weren't supposed to go up there," he whispered. "If you saw where it watches from, you shouldn't have gone up." "I didn't see anything," I said. His jaw tightened. "Not yet." That night, around 3 a.m., someone knocked on my bedroom door. 3 soft taps, a pause, a fourth, harder. I called out, "Elliot?" His voice answered faintly from behind his locked door. "Lucas, don't open it. I'm not there." Something pressed against my door, lightly at first. Testing. I blocked the door with my dresser and stayed awake until sunrise. The next few days were a blur. Elliot barely spoke. He looked thinner, exhausted, constantly glancing toward the hallway like he was expecting something to appear. Then came the breaking point. I came home from class early and found Elliot on the couch, staring at the empty hallway. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "It doesn't want me anymore," he whispered. "It wants movement, and you walk everywhere." "What does that mean?" His eyes didn't leave the hallway. "It learned you." That night I decided to leave. I didn't care about my belongings. I wanted out. I just needed to make it to the front door and get into the open air, where whatever lived in that apartment wouldn't follow. At 10:20 p.m., Elliot shut his door and locked it early. I heard him shove his dresser across the floor. He didn't say goodnight. I grabbed my bag and reached for the front doorknob. The metal felt ice cold, like it had been left outside in winter. As soon as the latch clicked, the lights flickered violently. The air shifted, thicker, heavier, and from the hallway came the rapid sound of footsteps. They weren't irregular or clumsy. They were steady, fast, and coming straight toward me. "Lucas!" Elliot screamed from behind his door. "Don't run down the hallway. It follows in straight lines." But panic took over. I ran anyway. The footsteps exploded into a full sprint behind me, slamming into the walls as they chased me through the living room. I felt the vibrations, the pounding, the cold wind rushing past. I didn't dare look back. I burst through the front door into the night, and just like that, the footsteps stopped. Doubt, silence, stillness. I didn't turn around. I ran until I reached campus police. Officers searched the apartment within the hour. Elliot was gone. His bedroom door was splintered. The crawlspace hatch hung open. His gray sweater, the one he always wore, lay torn down the back at the crawlspace entrance. There was no blood, no sign of where he went, no evidence I could show a camera. I moved out that night and never stepped foot on Alder Lane again. For months I kept my bedroom door locked. I avoided long hallways. I didn't speak about what happened, not to friends, not to professors, not to anyone. And little by little, the terror became a memory I tried to convince myself was stress, paranoia, trauma from my childhood flaring up. 3 years later, living in Chicago, I started to believe that explanation. Until the envelope arrived. No return address, no note inside. Just a single photograph of the hallway at 239 Alder Lane. Same carpet, same uneven light fixture, same long stretch of shadows. And at the very end of the hallway stood a figure, just barely visible, tall, thin, shoulders slumped forward as if it hadn't learned the posture right. It looked like Elliot, or something using his outline. On the back of the photo, written in shaky handwriting, were 5 words: "Don't ever leave your door open." That night I locked every door in my apartment. I shoved a chair under the knob. I sat awake until morning, listening for footsteps in the hallway. Just before dawn, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. 3 taps, a pause, a 4th, soft, patient, learning me again. Sometimes we run toward new beginnings without facing the fears we carry. But fears don't disappear. They follow the habits we repeat, the doors we leave open, the warnings we ignore. Trust your instincts and never overlook small signs. Safety often depends on the doors you close. I moved into the 3rd-floor apartment on Brentwood Lane in Columbus during the late summer of 2019, carrying more guilt than furniture. The building was run down, yellowed walls, flickering hallway lights, and a musty smell that clung to everything. I didn't care. I wanted distance from home, from the people who kept whispering condolences I couldn't stand to hear, from the silence my family drowned in after my younger brother Elliot died. The police called it a self-inflicted overdose, which sounded clean and official, but not true. Elliot was terrified of needles. He'd avoided getting blood drawn his entire life, and in the months before he died, he'd been paranoid in a way I didn't understand. He kept saying someone was following him. He'd ask me if I heard footsteps when there were none, or if I saw a white sedan down our street. I told him it was stress, or anxiety, or depression. I told him he needed sleep. 2 weeks later, he was gone. My parents unraveled. My mother barely spoke. My father worked until exhaustion swallowed him whole. I couldn't stand living in that house, feeling Elliot everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Moving to Ohio wasn't a fresh start. It was an escape. But even cheap apartments required money, so I posted an ad for a roommate. I didn't care who responded, as long as they paid rent and didn't pry too much into my personal life. Adrian Hale showed up the next day. He was quiet, polite, almost delicate in the way he moved. He spoke softly, smiled without showing his teeth, and said he was studying photography. He looked young but not naive. Something about him felt overly careful, like he practiced being harmless. He moved in 3 days later. For a while, things were fine. He paid on time, kept to himself, and cleaned almost obsessively. His room stayed spotless. His dishes were washed immediately. He walked softly, as if trying not to disturb the air. One evening, he paused at the framed picture of Elliot on the shelf. "This your brother?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "He looks like someone people trusted." The comment stuck with me, not because it was strange, but because it felt like a conclusion he'd already reached before asking. But I let it go. I was tired, grieving, and glad to have a roof over my head. Then he started asking questions. Too specific, too informed. Did Elliot ever talk about voices? Did he misplace things around the house? Was he scared of a particular person? I tried brushing it off as curiosity. People ask weird things when they don't know what to say about grief. But he wasn't asking to comfort me. He was studying my answers, and I was too numb to see it. The first strange thing I noticed was Elliot's old hoodie. I kept it sealed in a memory box in the back of my closet because it still smelled like him. One morning, I walked into the hallway and found it hanging on a hook. Adrian claimed he'd never seen it before. The second incident was the photo from our last hiking trip. I kept it on my nightstand, and one day it appeared on the kitchen counter next to a glass of water that wasn't mine. Again, Adrian denied touching it. I told myself grief made me forgetful, but the bedroom door was harder to dismiss. I always locked it at night, a habit that developed after Elliot died. Some morning, I'd wake to find it cracked open by an inch. It didn't matter if I checked the lock twice. It didn't matter if I heard it latch. It still opened. One night, I came home earlier than planned and heard Adrian talking in Elliot's old room. The small spare bedroom I'd let him use as a workspace. His voice was low, steady, and rhythmic. When I leaned closer, I realized he was repeating stories I'd told him about Elliot. Childhood memories, private conversations, details only family should know. I pushed the door open. Adrian jumped, pulling off his headphones. "Oh," he said with a strange smile. "Didn't hear you come in." "What were you repeating?" I asked. "Just practicing lines for a project," he said. "Sorry if it weirded you out." I didn't believe him, but I didn't know what else to accuse him of. Things escalated when he started dressing like Elliot. Same kind of worn jacket, same messy hairstyle, same cheap citrus cologne Elliot used when he wanted to smell older. When I asked why he was copying him, he tilted his head. "He seemed like someone worth remembering," he said softly. "Isn't it comforting to feel like he's still around?" It wasn't comforting. It was disturbing. But part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Trauma can twist your perception, make shadows look like threats. Then the nightmares began. Every night at 3 a.m., I jolted awake to find Adrian sitting silently at the foot of my bed. He'd stand, whisper, "I'm sorry," and leave before I could speak. My therapist said I was projecting fear onto someone who reminded me of Elliot. But Adrian didn't remind me of Elliot. He reminded me of someone studying Elliot. The truth started unraveling the night I searched Adrian's room. The storm outside rattled the windows, and something inside me finally snapped. I needed answers. I expected guilt, but not terror. Under his mattress, I found a thin leather notebook filled with frantic, obsessive writing. Elliot wasn't delusional. They made him think he was. Follow Caleb's routines. Memorize his schedule. He fills the same silences. Replace the gaps he left. He lived when he shouldn't have. Then the final entry. The night Elliot died, he wasn't alone. My chest tightened. It felt like my lungs stopped working. I didn't hear Adrian step into the room until he spoke behind me. "I didn't want you to find that yet." I spun around. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "You knew him," I whispered. "You knew Elliot." He nodded once. He was scared. He came to me first. Someone was watching him. I tried to help. "You're lying." "I'm not," he said quietly, "and the person who hunted him is near you now." Before I could ask anything else, 3 knocks sounded at the front door. Slow, firm, deliberate. Adrian's head snapped toward the hallway. "They found you again," he whispered. Adrian grabbed my arm, not violently, but urgently. "Fire escape," he whispered. "Now!" Someone slid a key into the front door lock. Not a break-in, a key. Adrian pushed open his window. "Go, Caleb. What about you? If we both run, they'll catch us." I hesitated, but fear propelled me onto the cold metal fire escape. My hands shook as I climbed down. Inside the apartment, I heard a voice, low, unfamiliar, speaking calmly to Adrian. I dropped the last few feet and sprinted through the alley, lungs burning, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. I ran until I reached the main road, where headlights and car engines drowned out everything else. When I turned back, lights flickered across the 3rd floor. Then the entire building went dark. Adrian never came out. By morning, police had taped off the entrance. They called it an electrical failure. I recognized the way authorities used neutral words to cover something they didn't want to explain. Adrian's name wasn't in the system. No student records, no rental files, no ID. He had existed right up until the moment he didn't. When officers allowed me inside to collect my belongings, something in the closet caught my eye. A small envelope was taped to the inside wall. My name, Adrian's handwriting. Inside, a note. "Elliot didn't die by accident. Neither will you, unless you run." And beneath it, Elliot's missing keychain, the one the police claimed was never found at the scene. My hands shook. My throat tightened. Everything Elliot had been afraid of came flooding back. The footsteps he heard, the car he kept seeing, the feeling of being watched. He wasn't paranoid. He was right. I packed a small bag and left Columbus that night. Adrian hadn't been trying to become Elliot. He'd been trying to finish what he failed to do 2 years ago. Protect us. I still don't know who followed Elliot or why they came after me, but I know this much. My brother didn't die alone, and I won't either. When someone you love says they're afraid, listen. Dismissing their fear doesn't protect them. It blinds you to danger until it's too late. Sometimes survival begins with believing what no one else will. People think leaving home is some dramatic movie moment decision. For me, it happened quietly. I was 22, sitting on the porch of my parents' house in Savannah, staring at the marsh and feeling like I was trapped in someone else's life. I dropped out of art school months before, and my family never let me forget it. Every dinner came with criticism disguised as concern, and I felt myself shrinking in ways I didn't know how to explain. When I finally packed my car, I told them I needed space. They told me I was making another mistake. Maybe I was, but staying felt worse. I drove north without a plan and ended up in Holywell, Massachusetts, a small New England town with quiet streets, old brick buildings, and a kind of stillness I mistook for safety. I found a room for rent on a local board. The house at 1627 Avery Lane belonged to a photographer named Marina Vale, who seemed warm, artistic, and a little eccentric. She greeted me barefoot, wearing a velvet blazer and a grin that felt rehearsed but friendly enough. The Victorian house was filled with antique mirrors and heavy curtains. Several interior doors were locked, and she brushed off my questions with a vague, "Storage. Don't worry about it." I told myself it wasn't my business anyway. I just needed a place where no one knew me. My last roommate in Savannah had stolen my artwork and sold it online, so I wasn't eager to trust anyone. But Marina's charm pushed past my caution. She complimented my sketches, offered me tea, and insisted the room had good energy. It had sunlight and a locking door. That was enough. "Think of this as a restart," she said as I signed the lease. I wanted to believe her. For the first couple of weeks, Marina felt like the kind of roommate people brag about. She worked odd hours as a photographer, drifted in and out of the house, and brought home pastries for us to split. She talked quickly, laughed loudly, and moved like she was always performing. But the house had a strange personality of its own. The mirrors reflected angles I didn't stand in. The floors creaked upstairs, even though both of our bedrooms were on the first floor. When I mentioned it, she said, "Old houses keep memories. Don't let them freak you out." The basement door bothered me the most. When I tried to open it looking for cleaning supplies, she shut it firmly. "Under renovation," she said. "Unsafe. Seriously, don't go down there." Her tone was sharper than usual. It put a knot in my stomach, but I ignored it. I was used to telling myself not to overreact. Marina's favorite topic was the circles she belonged to. Private gatherings, influential friends, people with connections. She showed me photographs. Elegant people in dimly lit rooms, their faces half-shadowed, their smiles tight. "These are the people who can change your life," she told me. "You just need the right introduction." I didn't think much of it until she invited me to a party at Holywell House, a massive estate outside town owned by philanthropist Landon King. I knew the name from magazine features and local headlines. Marina spoke of him like he was royalty. "You'll meet people who matter," she said. "Real opportunities. You should come." I hesitated. The invitation felt too grand for someone who barely had her life together. But Marina insisted it would help my art, and the idea of being seen, truly seen, was tempting. I'd spent so long feeling invisible. So I said yes. The drive to Holywell House wound through dense woods with long stretches of silence. By the time the mansion came into view, my nerves were buzzing. The place looked imposing. 3 stories, stone facade, barely any lights on. Not exactly party-like. Inside, guests moved like ghosts. Flawless hair, perfect posture, polite smiles. The air felt heavy, as if conversations were happening underneath the ones you could hear. Marina drifted off immediately, greeting people with a confidence I envied. I lingered near the hallway, trying not to look lost, when a pale woman brushed past me. Her hand clamped around my wrist. "Don't sign anything," she whispered. Before I could react, a man grabbed her arm and led her away, her eyes wide and terrified. My pulse hammered, but before I could process it, Marina appeared beside me with a clipboard. "Here," she said. "Just a standard attendance form. Everyone signs it." The document wasn't standard at all. It mentioned participant compliance, ongoing consent, and a demonstration protocol. Nothing about it felt normal. "I'm not signing," I said. Her expression changed instantly. The warmth in her face vanished, replaced by something cold and irritated. "Claire, stop being difficult. You're ruining this." "No," I said again. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Come with me." I tried to pull away, but she held tight, dragging me down a corridor toward a guarded door. The guard opened it without question. Inside was a semicircle of masked guests sitting in silence. A single chandelier lit the room. I didn't understand what I was looking at until Marina pushed me forward. Then I saw her. She was on the stage, tied at the wrists, blindfolded, shaking. My Marina, my roommate. She wasn't attending the party. She was the performance. A man lifted a metal rod wrapped in silk. The first strike landed on her side, and she screamed. Raw, agonized, real. The audience applauded softly, as if appreciating a piece of art. I stumbled back, knocking over a tray. No one looked at me. That detachment terrified me more than anything else. I used it to slip through a service door and out into the cold night. I ran barefoot down the long gravel driveway. My lungs burned, my feet bled. But I didn't stop until I reached the main road. When a delivery truck slowed beside me, I sobbed out a plea. "Anywhere, please." The driver didn't ask questions. At the police station, wrapped in a blanket, I gave them every detail I could remember. They sent officers to the mansion. I waited, replaying Marina's scream until my ears rang. When the officers returned, their expressions were neutral. "There was no party," one said. "What? That's impossible." "We found caretakers, no guests, no signs of an event, no woman matching the description you gave." I stared at them, stunned. "Did you check the basement? Or downstairs rooms? There was a door with a guard." "There was no guard," the officer interrupted. "No evidence of anything unusual." My voice cracked. "Marina, she lives with me. You can talk to her. We checked the address you gave. Her room is empty. Looks like no one lived there for months." That knocked the air out of my chest. Marina had been in that house with me every day. Her clothes, her cameras, her perfume, gone in a single night? Or had she been preparing to leave long before I noticed? They let me go with a suggestion to get some rest. On my pillow that night, I found a brick that hadn't been there before. A note was tied to it with simple handwriting: "Learn to keep quiet." I moved out the next morning and didn't tell anyone where I was going. 3 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You were never here." I didn't reply. I didn't sleep for weeks. I settled eventually in a tiny apartment outside Providence. It isn't beautiful, but it's safe enough. I keep my curtains closed, lock my door twice, and avoid crowds. I don't go to parties, no matter who invites me. My artwork stays in a drawer. Some nights, I hear footsteps in the hallway and freeze, waiting to see if they stop outside my door. They never do. I've thought a lot about Marina, whether she was luring me intentionally or whether she was trapped long before I met her. Maybe she believed those circles would elevate her. Maybe she didn't realize she wasn't the influencer. She was the sacrifice. When I close my eyes, I see her on that stage, trembling, blindfolded, waiting. The cruel applause, the polished faces, the perfect smiles. I don't know if the people at Holywell House will ever look for me again. I don't know whether Marina is alive. Sometimes I catch myself imagining that pale woman in the hallway, wondering if she escaped or if she never had the chance. But I remind myself of one thing. I refused to sign, and that single decision changed everything. Now, when someone seems too charming, too connected, too eager to help, I listen to the instinct I used to ignore. I warn others too, especially young women desperate for a fresh start, the kind who accept invitations they shouldn't. Survival isn't always heroic. Sometimes it's just paying attention, and sometimes it's running barefoot down a driveway into the night. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Charm can hide cruelty, opportunity can mask danger, and ignoring your instincts can cost far more than you realize. I used to think fear lived outside, behind windows, under beds, in the shadows of strange streets. Growing up in a small Oregon town, danger was a thing you locked out at night. But at 16, I learned otherwise. A man broke into our home while my sister and I were alone. He never made it past the hallway, thanks to our dog, but the sound of the doorknob twisting, that stuck with me. When I left home at 19 to attend community college in Tacoma, I told myself I was ready. New city, new independence. My parents helped me find a basement apartment listed online, cheap rent, close to campus, quiet building. The catch? I needed a roommate. That's how I met Evan Mercer. Pale skin, dark hair, a voice barely above a whisper. He said he was between jobs and needed a fresh start. I recognized something broken in him, something I didn't want to look at too closely because I was trying to fix my own life. The apartment itself was cramped, low ceilings and one tiny window. Evan showed up with just a backpack and a box of mismatched metal tools. He covered his bedroom window with black trash bags before he even unpacked. "Helps me sleep," he said. I nodded, pushing down a familiar warning pulse in my chest. It was just a roommate, just a guy trying to figure things out. I told myself fear belonged to the past. I had no idea it was moving in with me. At first, living with Evan was like coexisting with a shadow. He barely came out of his room. Meals vanished from the fridge without a sound. The bathroom fan would turn on at 3 a.m. even though the light stayed off. One night, I heard him whispering, soft, frantic, through the vents. I pressed my ear against the wall. No response from whoever he thought he was talking to. When I asked about it the next day, he smiled thinly. I rehearse conversations so I don't get surprised. He never explained who he was rehearsing for. A month later, the neighborhood was buzzing about petty thefts, tools, wallets, things that could fit in a pocket. Our landlord upgraded locks on every basement unit. Evan hated that. He muttered that people were ruining his sequences and slammed his door so hard the hinges cracked. I found screws on the hallway floor and then noticed the fire escape window, our only other exit, was bolted shut from the inside. Just in case someone tries to break in, he claimed. But all I could picture was someone trying to get out. My anxiety started spiraling again. I called my older sister, hoping she'd validate the fear coiled in my gut. "You always think the worst," she said gently. "You're safe. Don't let trauma run your life." I tried to believe her, tried to believe the scratching sound I heard in the crawl space at night wasn't footsteps. Tried to believe the locks were tighter because the world outside was bad, not because the danger was already in the room next to mine. The night everything changed, Tacoma was drowning in rain. I came home early from a lab class, soaked and shivering, and paused outside Evan's door. Loud thuds, a drill whirring, the sound of metal scraping into wood. My phone buzzed. "Campus alert, shelter in place. Armed intruder reported in the Birchwood district." The address was ours. My lungs locked. I threw myself into my room, locked the door, shoved my desk against it. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. The handle on my door twitched. "Caleb," Evan whispered, voice too calm. "Come out. I just need to finish this, before they get here." He ran his finger up the side of my door. "You and we already understand each other. They don't." Sirens exploded outside. Blue lights flashed against the basement window. Evan's breathing grew rough, angry. He pounded the door hard enough that dust rained from the frame. "Open it! They'll misunderstand what happened between us!" I didn't move, didn't breathe. When the police breached the basement, Evan lunged at them with a sharpened screwdriver, screaming about the right timing and sequences ruined. They tackled him just feet from my door for 40 terrifying minutes. They believed the intruder was still at large because they couldn't imagine someone inside the home being the threat. Afterward, detectives pieced together the truth. Evan had been the intruder all along. He'd been slipping out through the dryer vent crawl space, hitting homes within a few blocks, choosing places where residents were asleep or unaware. He was collecting keys, learning patterns, preparing for something bigger. One officer told me, he picked this unit because basements are easy to control, fewer exits. My legs almost gave out. I packed my life into 2 duffel bags and left before dawn. I didn't sleep for days. Every doorknob click sounded like him testing the lock. Every roommate interview afterward felt like signing away my safety. I rented a tiny upstairs studio after that. Small windows, solid door, too many locks. Even then, at night I'd lie awake listening, waiting for footsteps in the hall. Therapists said my hypervigilance was expected. They didn't hear his voice. So calm, so confident, as if danger didn't need to break in. It only needed to unpack a backpack and shut the door behind it. It took years before I said his name out loud without shaking. Even now, when I pass basement stairs, my chest tightens. I avoid shadows behind doors. I look twice where other people glance once. But I also learned something I wished no one ever had to learn. The threats we fear most aren't the ones outside rattling windows. Danger can cook breakfast with you. It can borrow your cups. It can whisper through vents at night. And sometimes, the person who seems harmless is just someone waiting for the right moment to stop acting harmless. I still believe people deserve compassion, but I no longer confuse compassion with permission. When fear speaks, I listen. Because safety isn't paranoia, it's survival. Trust is earned, not assumed. Never ignore your instincts to spare someone else's feelings. Your intuition exists to protect you, especially when danger is already inside the door. I didn't move to Portland for adventure or a fresh start the way people romanticize it. I moved because my life had collapsed, and I didn't know where else to go. My breakup had been messy in a slow, suffocating way. The kind where nothing dramatic happens, but you wake up one morning and realize you don't recognize yourself. My ex had chipped away at me through concern, the kind that sounds caring until you realize it's control. He checked my phone to make sure I was safe. He asked where I was going, just so he'd know. I ignored those red flags because it felt easier than confronting them. By the time I finally walked away, I felt like a ghost wearing my own face. So I drove south with my clothes shoved into the back of my car and my savings scraped together just enough for 1 month's rent somewhere cheap, anywhere cheap. That's how I ended up in front of an old Victorian house at 1436 Dunbar Street. The paint peeled around the windows and the porch creaked under my shoes, but the rent was affordable, and I was too tired to question why. Carter Lowell, the owner, opened the door wearing thick glasses and an oversized sweater that hung off him like it belonged to someone larger. He smiled in a way that felt practiced, but not in a threatening way. Just a little too careful. "You must be Madison," he said softly. "The attic room is ready." The attic was small with slanted ceilings and a single window overlooking the street. It smelled faintly of old books and dust. Something about its tucked-away feeling comforted me. A little cocoon. Carter went over the house rules in a calm, almost gentle voice. Windows had to stay locked because old houses are easy targets. No guests without notice because he needed to know who was here. Text him when I got home so he didn't worry. The rules should have bothered me. A younger version of myself might have said no. But I told myself he was just cautious, and I didn't trust my instincts enough to argue. That first night I fell asleep exhausted, only to wake at 3:19 a.m. to slow footsteps outside my attic door. They paused, close enough that I could hear breathing, then retreated down the stairs. In the morning, Carter insisted he slept early and probably hadn't heard anything. "Old houses make strange noises," he said kindly. "It takes time to get used to." I let myself believe him. I needed to. For the first couple of weeks, the house settled into a routine. Carter was polite, quiet, always cooking something herbal or reading in the living room. I told myself he was harmless, maybe just socially awkward. But small things started to unsettle me. He'd make comments about my schedule that I hadn't told him. He'd mention I must be tired because Tuesdays are your long days at work, though I'd never said anything about it. The first time it happened, I convinced myself I'd forgotten telling him. The second time, I wasn't so sure. One day after work, I found my laundry neatly folded on my bed. I walked downstairs holding a shirt. "You did my laundry?" I asked. He nodded without looking up from chopping vegetables. "You left it in the dryer. I thought I'd help." His tone was normal, calm, but something in my chest tightened. My room was locked when I left that morning. At night, I'd sometimes wake to find the attic light on even though I'd turned it off. Carter blamed it on old wiring. "This house does things," he told me. But the house wasn't the only thing. His bedroom door was always open a crack, like he wanted to hear everything. I started putting a chair under my door at night. The real turning point came a month in. While cleaning the kitchen drawer, I found an envelope addressed to someone named Ellen Ward, marked attic room. Carter had told me I was his first tenant. The handwriting looked recent, the envelope unyellowed. When I casually asked him who she was, he answered too quickly. "She moved out suddenly. Family emergency. Haven't talked to her since." The smile that followed didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, I found a hair tie under my bed. Brown, thin, not mine. A cold feeling settled into my ribs. Something happened here, something he didn't want to talk about. But once again, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Past trauma makes you doubt everything, especially yourself. Strange incidents multiplied until they no longer felt dismissible. One morning, I woke to find my bedroom door cracked open, even though I'd locked it, and shoved the chair under the knob. The chair was still in place. The lock was undone from the inside. Another day, I noticed the attic window, painted shut when I moved in, slightly loosened, as if someone had tried to pry it open. The worst was the tiny black object I found tucked behind my books, a camera lens. Detached, but still unmistakably a lens. I didn't confront Carter. I was afraid I already knew what he'd say. Something calm, gentle. Something that made me doubt myself. Abusers don't always raise their voice. Sometimes they whisper. His comments grew stranger. "You're safer in this house than anywhere else," he said one night while stirring a pot of soup. "People go missing all the time in this city." I forced a laugh. "That's dark," he shrugged. "It's true." Then he looked at me for a long moment. Too long. That same night, I heard footsteps again at 3:19 a.m. They paused outside my door just like before. I checked my bank account the next morning. I couldn't afford to move yet. Rent prices were ridiculous everywhere. I told myself I'd last another paycheck. I shouldn't have waited. One evening, I came home early. The house was quiet, but not empty. As I walked up the attic stairs, I heard soft movement inside my room. Subtle, like someone didn't want to be heard. The door was locked from the inside. Then the footsteps stopped. A second later, the lock clicked and Carter stepped out, holding a small box of my things. My journal, a photo, loose change. "Oh," he said, blinking as if surprised. "You're home early." I was checking a leak in the ceiling. "There is no leak," I said. He smiled gently. "You mentioned it." "I didn't." He tilted his head. "Maybe you forgot." That's when I knew I had to leave. I packed quietly while he slept. Or at least I told myself he slept. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes into my suitcase. Every creak of the attic floor sounded too loud. At 4 a.m., I dragged my suitcase toward the stairs. I held my breath as the house hummed with silence. When I reached the bottom, I stopped so fast my suitcase tipped forward. Carter stood there. He wasn't smiling. He looked alert, awake, as if he'd been waiting. "I knew you'd do this," he said softly. "They all try to leave." I was too scared to ask who they were. Behind him was a door I hadn't noticed before, narrow, slightly ajar, leading to a basement. A cold draft seeped out. Something about it felt wrong, like the air itself had memories trapped inside. "What's down there?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "Things you shouldn't worry about anymore." I stepped back instinctively. He stepped forward. Adrenaline hit me so fast it made me dizzy. I darted past him and ran into the bathroom, slamming the door. He knocked gently. "You're overreacting," he murmured. "Come out. You're confused. We can talk." I called 911 with shaking hands. When sirens echoed down the street, he went silent. Police pulled him out of the house without a struggle. In the basement, they found boxes full of women's belongings, shirts, makeup, notebooks. Ellen Ward's journals were there too, describing the same things I experienced. She'd run off without reporting him. I understood why. I moved into a bright one-bedroom apartment with white walls and too many locks. I kept the curtains open all the time just to let sunlight prove the world was still normal. But normal didn't feel safe anymore. Every footstep in the hallway made me freeze. Every unfamiliar noise made my pulse jump. I told myself I'd get over it. Therapy helped. Time helped. But fear changes how you see people. It sharpens everything. Sometimes that sharpness felt like paranoia, but other times it felt like the only thing keeping me safe. A year after leaving Dunbar Street, I found an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Someone had slipped it in by hand. Inside was a single photo of the house, my old window, dark, still, watching. Never silence your instincts to protect someone else's comfort. When something feels wrong, trust that feeling. It's often the first warning you get, and sometimes the only one. I used to tell myself that rock bottom was behind me, that the nights I spent awake on my friend's lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling until sunrise, were just a temporary punishment for letting my life collapse. Losing my job at the architectural firm had shredded my confidence, and the insomnia that followed hollowed me out. But by the time I turned 29, things finally looked like they were tilting in my favor again. I had a junior drafting job waiting for me in Seattle, low pay, but steady. It felt like someone had handed me a second chance. That's how I ended up renting the old Victorian on Willowcrest Street. The place leaned a little to the left and creaked anytime the wind blew, but it was cheap enough for someone climbing out of financial ruin. Too cheap, honestly. The landlord explained why. I'd have a basement roommate, already arranged, rent split down the middle. He kept emphasizing that the guy was quiet, never caused trouble, barely used the shared spaces. He said all this like it was supposed to reassure me, and at the time, it did. I needed the affordability more than I needed comfort. I met Cole Madsen the day I moved in, pale, rail-thin, early 30s, and so quiet I wondered if he had a sore throat or just didn't like talking. He worked nights at a pharmaceutical warehouse, he told me, which meant he slept during the day and kept mostly to the basement. Perfect for me. I was still rebuilding, emotionally, financially, and silence felt like the closest thing to salvation. But the house had a personality I wasn't prepared for. Some homes settle. This one whispered, groaned, and breathed. Every night I heard footsteps below me, steady and unhurried, long before Cole was supposed to be off work. Sometimes they drifted up the air vents, soft but deliberate. When I asked him about them one morning as he brewed coffee, he shrugged and said, "Pipes. Old houses make noises." The answer was casual enough, but the faint smell of bleach on him made something inside me tighten. Every Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, the odor drifted through the floorboards, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Bleach. I asked if he'd spilled something down there, but he only said, "Just cleaning." No explanation, no details. And the basement door, always locked, rattled at odd hours, like someone bumped into it or brushed past too quickly. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. After last year's anxiety spiral, every sound felt amplified. I wanted to believe the house was just old and Cole was just private. Then, one night, I found the laundry room window cracked open from the inside. It was too small for me to climb through, but someone thin could squeeze their way out. I shut it and checked the lock twice. The idea of Cole crawling out at night, or someone crawling in, settled like ice in my chest. Later that week, I woke to murmuring beneath my floor. Multiple voices, not angry, but steady, like a conversation. I pressed my ear to the hardwood, holding my breath. There was shuffling, then a loud thud, then nothing. In the morning, Cole insisted he'd worked his shift. He said the noise must have been the house again, and headed to bed without looking at me. The calm in his voice unsettled me more than the noise. The logbook was the first undeniable proof that something was wrong. He left it on the kitchen counter by accident one morning, open to a page filled with neat handwriting. My name wasn't written anywhere, but it didn't need to be. Leaves at 7:32 a.m. Phone call at 9:14 p.m. Female voice. Laughter. Lights out upstairs at 11:08 p.m. Bathroom use. 2 minutes. Woke briefly around 2:40 a.m. He wasn't tracking the house. He was tracking me. When I confronted him, he didn't look embarrassed or ashamed. He just stared at the logbook as if it were a grocery list. "That's nothing," he said. "Just habit from work. We track things." Then he smiled. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't natural. I felt a chill run beneath my skin. People who smile at odd moments usually aren't smiling for the right reasons. A few days later, I came home early from my shift. I didn't expect Cole to be home, but I heard heavy dragging from the basement, long scraping sounds across concrete. Against every instinct I had, I called down the stairwell. "You okay down there?" Silence. Then footsteps. Slow, controlled. He emerged from the basement sweaty, breathing hard, with a dark streak across his sleeve. He said he was moving storage boxes. The stain, he claimed, was paint. But when he passed me, I smelled metal, strong and unmistakable, not paint. I barely slept that night. My therapist once told me that trauma makes your brain live in two realities at once, the one you're in and the one you're terrified will return. I wasn't sure which reality I was experiencing now, but both told me to be afraid. A week later, the landlord called. Cole hadn't dropped off his portion of the rent, something he'd never missed in all his time living there. The landlord asked if I'd seen him that morning. I hadn't. That night, the footsteps returned, slower this time, almost pacing. I sat upright in bed, listening. But the basement door was wide open. I crept halfway down the stairs and saw the lights were off. Total darkness below. I called the police. They searched every inch of the basement. The officer in charge found the false wall behind a metal shelving unit. Inside the hidden room were boxes of stolen medical supplies, controlled substances, syringes, sealed containers, and a duffel bag filled with cash, clothes, and IDs under different names. The surveillance logs they found matched the handwriting in the notebook upstairs. Cole had been preparing to flee. Watching me wasn't personal. He needed to know when the house was empty, when he could move things around, when it was safe to come and go. I wasn't a target. I was a variable. But sitting above him every night, I never felt like just a variable. After the police left, the landlord replaced the locks and boarded up the hidden room. The house was technically safe again. Cleaned, reset, but safety didn't return with the repairs. Every creak felt like footsteps. Every draft felt like breath. Every shadow reminded me of the logbook, the bleach, the metallic smell on his sleeve. The house was supposed to be my stable beginning. Instead, it forced me to face something I'd avoided for years. Danger never announces itself. It just lives quietly, right beneath your feet, waiting for the right moment. Sometimes at night, when the wind slides against the old siding, I swear I hear something pacing below. I know it's my mind playing tricks, but fear has a way of rehearsing the worst moments of your life again and again. And sometimes, when I walk past the basement door, I swear I can smell bleach. The moral, if there is one, is simple. You never truly know the people you live beside. Silence isn't safety, and privacy isn't always harmless. Bad people don't always look like threats. Sometimes they pay rent on time, smile politely, and walk softly enough that you don't realize they've mapped your entire life behind your back. Long before I moved into that narrow brick duplex on Camden Street, I thought I already knew what danger looked like. It had fangs and raised voices and slammed doors. It looked like my college roommate in Chicago, a guy who could switch from joking to screaming in seconds, who'd rifle through my stuff and gaslight me if I confronted him. Leaving that place felt like crawling back into sunlight after months underground. I promised myself I'd never ignore red flags again, but life is expensive when you're healing. When I got the graphic design job in Pittsburgh, the pay covered rent. Barely. So I posted an ad for a roommate. I told myself it would be fine this time. I'd be smarter, more careful, more aware. Then a message popped up. Lucas Ward. We went to the same middle school. I vaguely remembered a quiet kid with shaggy hair who sat in the back of class drawing dragons. He said he'd been living in Texas, needed a place fast, and could pay his share up front. It felt like fate handing me a low-risk solution. Familiar face. Fresh start. What could go wrong? The night he arrived, the wind was howling and the snow came down sideways. He showed up at 11:58 p.m., shoulders dusted white, carrying a single oversized duffel. "Sorry, long drive," he said with a grin that didn't quite match his tired eyes. I brushed off the uneasy feeling. It was just nerves, I told myself. Back then, I still believed that trusting someone was a virtue, not a gamble. I had no idea I'd just let a thief into my home, and into the quiet parts of my life I thought were safe. At first, it was easy to explain away the weirdness. Lucas unpacked almost nothing, leaving his duffel bag zipped tight beside his mattress. When he wasn't sleeping, he was pacing. He'd wander the apartment late at night, bare feet whisper soft on the wooden floors. One morning, I came into the kitchen and every cabinet door hung open like a mouth caught mid-scream. Lucas walked in yawning. "Sleepwalking, maybe," he said, shrugging. Another night, I found the front latch unlocked. "Wind probably did it," he laughed. The wind couldn't turn a deadbolt. I tried to rationalize everything. My therapist had warned me not to jump to conclusions just because my past hurt. But the red flags multiplied. Lucas would tell random stories about his life that never lined up. One day, he claimed he was a security guard in Houston. Later that week, he talked about selling houses in Dallas. Then my laptop vanished from my desk. 30 minutes later, I found it sitting on top of the washer downstairs. "Oh man," Lucas chuckled, scratching his neck. "I borrowed it to check email. Must have spaced out." I didn't laugh. My neighbors downstairs, an older couple named the Masons, recognized Lucas from somewhere. "Saw him by our shed at dawn," Mr. Mason said casually one afternoon. "Thought he might be looking for a lost pet." Lucas didn't like pets, didn't own one. By the end of that week, eating breakfast with him felt like sitting beside a stranger wearing a familiar mask. He'd stare too long, ask oddly personal questions. My anxiety kept whispering, "You know what danger looks like. Don't ignore it again." But I kept trying to believe Lucas was just struggling. The truth was struggling to make me listen. One night in early December, snow blanketed the street in a heavy silence. I was lying in bed scrolling my phone when I realized the apartment felt colder than usual. The hallway light, the one we always left on, was off. I got up quietly. Halfway to the door, I heard voices, soft, hushed, right outside on the porch. Footsteps, too. Then the doorknob jiggled. Once, twice. My heart hammered against my ribs. The hallway light flicked on suddenly. Lucas stepped into view, shirtless, chest heaving. "Sorry, man," he said breathlessly. "Just needed some fresh air." "It's snowing," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. He smiled with too many teeth and disappeared into his room. That night, I barely slept. And in the morning, something else was gone. The spare key I'd taped behind a painting in my room. When I asked, Lucas frowned like I'd insulted him. "You think I'm some kind of thief?" I didn't answer. Later that day, my landlord texted. There'd been a break-in downstairs. I rushed to the basement storage. Boxes were ripped open. Not all, just the ones with personal stuff. Old photos, sketchbooks, my passport. Lucas stood behind me holding a flashlight, watching like it was a movie. "Someone knew exactly what to look for," I said. Lucas's reply chilled the air. "People always know more than you think." His shadow stretched long across the cement floor, and for the first time since he moved in, I was truly afraid. 2 days later, I came home early. Snowstorm canceled a client meeting. I pushed open the front door quietly, wanting nothing more than a hot drink and silence. The apartment was dim, the only light falling from the cracked door of my bedroom. Lucas was inside, kneeling, rummaging. My backpack lay overturned on the floor. IDs scattered like cards in a losing hand. My locked envelope of emergency cash was in his fist. He spun around when he saw me. His smile was crooked, frantic. "Dude, I was just looking for tape." Tape. I backed into the hallway, grabbed my phone, locked myself in the bathroom with shaking hands. He pounded on the door, voice rising. "You don't understand. I just needed enough to get through tonight." While he yelled and begged and cursed, I dialed 911. The police arrived fast. Neighbors had already reported someone matching his description trying car handles all week. They found burglary tools in his bag and my missing passport in his coat. As they cuffed him, Lucas stared at me, breathing hard, eyes wild. "You let people get to know you," he said, voice low and angry. "They take advantage. You should have known that." I shut the door before they led him away, and then I sank to the floor, cold tile against my spine, trying to breathe the panic out of my chest. My home no longer felt like mine. He was gone, but the fear he'd planted stayed. I changed the locks, installed cameras, pressed a chair under my bedroom doorknob every night. Weeks later, while checking the breaker box after a flickering light, I found the spare key, hidden behind the panel, positioned like it was waiting. I stood there, key cold in my hand, realizing Lucas hadn't planned to leave quietly. If I hadn't come home early that day, what would I have found instead? I started leaving lights on. I slept with headphones in because silence made my heart race. And the worst part was knowing that wasn't paranoia. That was survival instinct. One snowy evening, Mr. Mason from downstairs caught me in the hall. "You did the right thing calling the cops," he said gently. "People like that, they don't stop on their own." I nodded, though I didn't feel brave. I just felt lucky. Camden Street wasn't the fresh beginning I hoped for, but it taught me something my past almost erased. Trust isn't a gift, it's earned. And boundaries keep you safe, not cold. Maybe healing isn't about pretending danger doesn't exist. Maybe it's about recognizing it early enough to walk away before it walks through your door. Even familiar faces can hide dangerous intentions. Listen to your instincts, set clear boundaries, and never ignore the red flags. Your safety is worth more than sparing someone's feelings.